brain hack that makes you 10x smarter and impossible to control. Machiavelli. They taught you to chase intelligence as if it were a race, memorize, perform, compete. But what if intelligence was never about speed, but about power? The power to perceive beyond what others see. The power to think without being controlled. Machiavelli once wrote, "Men are governed by two forces, fear and thought. Most people never escape the first. They live in reaction, repeating what the world tells them to believe. But the rare ones, the truly intelligent, are those who learn to hack their own minds. They understand that thinking itself can be redesigned, that the brain is not a prison, it's a weapon. If you're still trying to fit into systems that drain your energy, if you feel manipulated by trends, emotions, or people's expectations, this message is for you. Because today, you'll learn the Machiavellian secret behind mental sovereignty. Not intelligence in the academic sense, but a sharper awareness that multiplies your perception tenfold. You'll see how the great manipulators of history, rulers, philosophers, and monks alike, all use the same hidden rule. Control your own mind before someone else does. That is the real brain hack. It's not a trick of memory or logic. It's the art of self-direction, of thinking in such a way that no one can think for you. Imagine being immune to manipulation. Imagine understanding human behavior so deeply that people can no longer lie to you. Not because you're cynical, but because you see through them. This is not fantasy. It's the level of awareness that Machiavelli trained himself to reach. He observed the minds of men like a scientist studies movement, without emotion, without judgment. He found patterns, and from those patterns, he built a power that made kings fear his mind more than any sword. That's what we're going to explore. How to awaken that inner strategist, the one capable of seeing both light and shadow, logic and instinct, truth and illusion, all at once. This video is not about tricks or motivation. It's about transformation. You're about to discover how to reprogram the invisible architecture of your brain to think like those who cannot be dominated, those who remain calm while the world panics. You'll learn how to shift from emotional reactivity to pure strategic clarity, the kind of clarity that makes you appear mysterious, untouchable, and powerful. But be warned, once you see how your mind has been conditioned, you can never unsee it. You'll begin to notice the invisible manipulations in conversations, in media, even in your relationships. You'll realize that freedom doesn't come from rebellion. It comes from awareness. Before we begin, I want you to comment this phrase below. My mind belongs to me. It's not just a sentence. It's a declaration of independence. Like, subscribe, and stay until the end. Because the truth you'll hear today isn't something you'll find in books or classrooms. It's the truth that only the silent minds of power have understood. The secret that made Machiavelli impossible to control. In Renaissance Florence, power was not held by the strongest, but by the most perceptive. The city was a battlefield of minds where betrayal, persuasion, and vision decided who ruled. Amid this chaos, Niccolo Machiavelli stood not as a soldier, but as a master observer of human psychology. He discovered that the true battlefield is not the streets or the throne room, it is the human brain. Whoever understands how thoughts are formed controls destiny itself. While others sought to conquer lands, Machiavelli sought to conquer perception. He studied how belief is shaped, how emotion blinds reason, and how language can sculpt obedience. To him, control wasn't brute force, it was mental architecture. What Machiavelli saw 500 years ago still governs modern society. Every era has its rulers, but in every age the mechanism is the same. Influence the mind and the body follows. Monarchs used fear, religions used faith, corporations used distraction. Yet behind all these systems, there lies one principle. Whoever defines what you focus on, defines what you believe. Machiavelli noticed that most people do not think, they react. Their intelligence is borrowed, their ideas are prepackaged, handed to them by those who understand the deeper structures of thought. That's why the ancient sages, from the Stoics of Greece to the Zen masters of Asia, warned about mental slavery long before the term existed. They taught that freedom begins within the skull. Buddha called it the purification of perception. Marcus Aurelius called it the governance of impressions. Machiavelli, more brutally, called it manipulation turned inward. He believed that if you could manipulate your own impulses, your fear, your anger, your desires, then no one outside could manipulate you. That was his hidden discipline, a kind of psychological alchemy where weakness was converted into awareness. But over time, this knowledge was buried. The schools taught obedience instead of strategy, memorization instead of mastery. We became trained to store information, not to wield it. Intelligence was reduced to performance, a grade, a status, a mask. And in this performance, we forgot how to see. Our brains, flooded with noise, forgot silence. Our thoughts, enslaved by reaction, forgot observation. What Machiavelli and the ancients understood is that intelligence is not accumulation, it's discernment, to know which thoughts are truly yours and which ones have been planted there by others. This is the forgotten art you're about to reclaim. The natural, biological, and psychological power that turns ordinary awareness into strategic perception. Because your brain is not a passive organ, it's an active weapon, and when trained properly, it can cut through illusion like a blade through fog. The Machiavellian mind does not seek truth to feel superior. It seeks truth to be free. There's a moment in every person's life when they realize the world doesn't reward intelligence. It rewards control, control of emotion, control of focus, control of perception. And yet, most people believe intelligence is something you're born with, a genetic lottery of IQ and memory. That's the illusion that keeps the masses obedient. Machiavelli saw through it. He understood that the truly intelligent person is not the one who knows more, but the one who can see through more. His real discovery wasn't political, it was psychological. He realized that the mind can be trained to detach, to observe the chaos without drowning in it. That single act of inner detachment is the brain hack that makes a person 10 times smarter and impossible to control. To understand this, you have to start with the first principle of Machiavellian awareness. Control your interpretation before the world controls it for you. Most people don't perceive reality. They perceive narratives. Every event, every comment, every gesture gets filtered through the lens of emotion and bias. That's how manipulation works. It feeds on your automatic interpretations. If someone can trigger your emotion, they control your perception. Machiavelli trained himself to pause, to slow down his mind just long enough to ask, what is truly happening here? That pause, that small gap between reaction and awareness, is where intelligence multiplies. Because while others drown in emotion, the Machiavellian mind studies the current. If you want to become 10 times smarter, learn to interrupt your automatic thoughts. Every time something provokes you, stop, breathe, and name what you feel. That act alone rewires the brain, shifting you from being a puppet to being a player. The second principle, never think in isolation, think in systems. A weak mind sees events as random. A powerful mind sees patterns. Machiavelli was obsessed with patterns. How fear leads to obedience. How praise leads to dependence. How hope can be weaponized to control crowds. This systemic thinking transforms intelligence from linear to multidimensional. It allows you to predict outcomes not by guessing, but by understanding cause and consequence. If you train your brain to see everything, your emotions, relationships, even failures, as part of an interlinked web of influence, you begin to think like history's strategists. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what chain of events produced this? That is where control begins, not in emotion, but in analysis. The third principle, detach your identity from your thoughts. Most people live inside a mental fog where every thought feels personal. But thoughts are not you. They're signals. They come and go like waves in the sea. Machiavelli's strength was his ability to study human nature without moral panic. He could observe deceit, fear, and ambition without collapsing into disgust or admiration. That detachment made him dangerous because he could see clearly what others couldn't face. The modern world teaches the opposite, emotional identification. You are your feelings, you are your opinions. But once you identify with thought, you become easy to manipulate. The moment someone can make you defend your emotions, they own your mind. The Machiavellian brain hack is to turn your mind into a laboratory, not a battlefield. Observe your thoughts as data. Analyze your triggers. Ask yourself, who benefits from me thinking this way? That single question will dismantle half the illusions that rule your life. The fourth principle, use selective ignorance as a weapon. We live in an age of overstimulation, endless information, opinions, and distractions. People mistake noise for intelligence, but Machiavelli would call that intellectual gluttony. True power lies in the ability to ignore, to filter the unnecessary, to focus energy only on what strengthens your mind and position. Every piece of useless information you absorb dilutes your clarity. The smartest minds in history, from monks to generals, mastered this discipline. They starved their attention from triviality. In the modern world, this means turning off the noise, not to escape reality, but to sharpen your perception. Choose your inputs like a king chooses his advisors, because what you allow into your mind shapes the world you see. The fifth principle, transform emotion into analysis. This is the hardest and most dangerous form of intelligence. Machiavelli never rejected emotion. He transmuted it. When he was betrayed, he studied betrayal. When he was exiled, he studied power. Every emotional wound became an investigation. This ability to metabolize pain into knowledge is what made him immune to manipulation, because manipulators depend on your emotions staying unexamined. They need you to react impulsively so they can predict your behavior. But when you analyze instead of react, you become unreadable, and that unreadability is power. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, which emotion controls me the most? Fear, guilt, or the need to be liked? Comment your answer below. Awareness is the first step toward liberation. Now, let's go deeper. If you've noticed, every one of these principles points toward one core idea: mental self-governance. It's the idea that intelligence is not an external measure of capacity, but an internal mastery of perception. Machiavelli's writings were not moral guides. They were manuals for human clarity. He didn't teach people how to be cruel. He taught them how to be unshakable. In his private notes, he hinted that a ruler who cannot govern his own mind will eventually lose control of his kingdom. Substitute kingdom for life, and you'll understand the entire essence of his philosophy. Let's examine how this brain hack works neurologically. Modern neuroscience confirms what Machiavelli intuited centuries ago. The brain doesn't distinguish much between external threat and internal imagination. Your thoughts, when believed intensely, can trigger the same stress responses as real danger. Manipulators use this against you by keeping your mind in a constant state of imagined crisis. But if you can teach your brain to witness the storm without becoming it, you deactivate that circuit. The amygdala, the fear center, loses its power. And in that silence, another part of the brain takes over, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of strategy, foresight, and executive decision-making. In that state, you stop being reactive and start being deliberate. You think in longer timelines. You plan without panic. You see not just what people say, but what they mean. The Machiavellian mind doesn't eliminate emotion. It redirects it. When you feel anger, it asks, what boundary was crossed? When you feel sadness, it asks, what attachment was broken? Every emotion becomes a map, every feeling a code, and once decoded, it reveals the deeper structure of your life. That's what it means to be 10 times smarter, not to memorize more, but to perceive more. The sixth principle, master the power of invisibility. Machiavelli understood that once you show your intelligence too openly, people will try to neutralize you. He advised rulers to appear ordinary, even naive, while quietly outthinking everyone. This wasn't hypocrisy, it was psychological camouflage. The brain hack here is to protect your mind's evolution through discretion. When you speak less, observe more, and act only when necessary, your intelligence compounds silently. It's like interest in a hidden account, growing unnoticed. Every moment you stay silent while others reveal themselves is a moment of advantage. The paradox is that the more invisible your thoughts become, the more visible your results will be. The seventh principle, train your mind to see through motives, not words. Words deceive, motives don't. Machiavelli trained his perception by watching how people acted when their interests were threatened. He noticed that truth hides not in speech, but in patterns of behavior. To apply this, observe people's consistency. Do they act when it's inconvenient? Do they keep promises without gain? Do they help when no one sees? This ability to read motives instead of appearances makes you psychologically invincible. You stop projecting innocence onto manipulation. You start recognizing the laws of human nature instead of denying them. This doesn't make you cold, it makes you conscious. The eighth principle: detach from the collective mind. Every era has its madness, mass opinions, moral panics, collective beliefs. Machiavelli lived through revolutions and religious wars, yet he saw the same human mechanism beneath them: the herd instinct. People find comfort in agreement, not truth. To hack your brain, you must train yourself to stand apart from the noise. This doesn't mean arrogance, it means observation. When everyone rushes in one direction, pause. Ask, who benefits from this movement? The crowd is emotional, the strategist is silent. This detachment gives you access to ideas the masses will never see because they're too busy reacting. The ninth principle: convert silence into power. In Machiavelli's world, silence wasn't weakness, it was pressure. When you stop explaining yourself, people project their fears and fantasies onto you. Silence becomes a mirror that reveals their inner state. Learn to hold it. When you don't rush to fill the void speaks for you. This creates psychological gravity, an aura of mystery that draws respect without effort. The most intelligent people use silence as both shield and sword. It protects their energy and cuts through noise. And finally, the 10th principle: make thinking your religion. Machiavelli treated thought as a sacred act. He believed contemplation was the purest form of power. To think clearly in a chaotic world is a spiritual rebellion. Every morning, he would isolate himself, read, reflect, and write as if in conversation with the dead. Philosophers, kings, generals. He believed wisdom accumulates across generations, and that by studying it, you inherit the intelligence of centuries. You can do the same, not by worshipping information, but by integrating it. Reflect on your day, observe your mistakes, learn from the patterns that repeat. The mind, like a muscle, grows through deliberate reflection. The more you analyze your own behavior, the harder it becomes for anyone else to manipulate it. This is the Machiavellian brain hack, the transformation of consciousness from reactive to strategic, from impulsive to sovereign. Intelligence is no longer what you know, it's how deeply you see, and the deeper you see, the less you can be controlled. You've already learned how Machiavelli trained his mind to observe rather than react. But the true mastery of intelligence begins when observation turns into creation, when you no longer just perceive reality, but sculpt it through awareness. This is the second layer of the Machiavellian brain hack, understanding how perception shapes reality and how to control it from within. Because what you focus on grows, and what you ignore dissolves. The untrained mind reacts to the external world. The Machiavellian mind designs it. To enter this level, you must confront one brutal truth. Most people don't want intelligence. They want comfort. They use thinking as a form of escape, not transformation. They seek explanations that protect their illusions, not those that destroy them. Machiavelli was feared because he didn't protect illusions. He stripped human behavior bare. He saw that the greatest enemy of intelligence is emotional dependency, the need to be liked, validated, or approved. That dependency enslaves millions without chains. It makes the smartest people act foolishly just to preserve their image. So the first paradox of true intelligence is this: to be free, you must be willing to be misunderstood. The one who sees clearly often appears cruel to those who live in fantasy. Machiavelli accepted that. He knew that clarity offends confusion. When you start thinking differently, people will resist you. They'll project their fears, call you cold, arrogant, manipulative. Anything to make you doubt your independence. But that resistance is proof of growth. Every great thinker in history, from Socrates to Nietzsche, faced exile from the comfort of conformity. The mind that becomes sovereign will always disturb the collective. Accept it. The price of mental freedom is solitude. The second paradox: to become unmanipulable, you must first understand manipulation. Machiavelli never denied that power can be dark. But to resist darkness, you must see its structure. He studied deception, not to practice it, but to recognize it in others. He learned how flattery, guilt, and fear are used as weapons of control. In modern life, this is psychological warfare, used by media, corporations, even relationships. They make you feel guilty for setting boundaries. They make you afraid of standing alone. But once you see the mechanism, the illusion collapses. When someone tries to emotionally bait you, you can almost see the strings they pull. And in that moment, you realize power is not about domination. It's about perception. Whoever sees the manipulation first wins. The third paradox, real intelligence requires humility. This seems to contradict Machiavelli's image as the cold strategist. But what people misunderstand is that his clarity came from humility before truth, not arrogance. He knew he could be wrong, so he studied endlessly. He questioned everything. He dismantled his own beliefs before others could. The arrogant mind stops learning because it loves being right. The Machiavellian mind keeps learning because it fears being blind. This humility sharpens intelligence like a blade. Not soft humility, but strategic humility. The kind that listens to everything but believes nothing until tested by reality. The fourth paradox. To lead others, you must first master yourself. This is where the brain hack becomes spiritual. Machiavelli observed rulers who tried to control their people while being slaves to their own emotions. He called them doomed because no external empire can survive internal chaos. Self-mastery is the foundation of leadership. The calmest mind in the room always ends up in control, not by force but by gravity. People subconsciously follow emotional stability because it feels like safety. When your mind becomes centered, when no praise excites you and no insult disturbs you, you project an aura of command. That's the kind of invisible dominance Machiavelli described. Not tyranny, but presence. The fifth paradox. Your thoughts are not private. They shape your energy. Every thought you entertain alters your tone, your eyes, your posture. People feel it. Machiavelli noted that rulers who feared betrayal often created it, because their paranoia infected their court. Similarly, if you dwell on weakness, your body signals it. Your voice, your eyes, your decisions, they all broadcast your inner state. The brain hack here is to think thoughts that strengthen your energy field. When you think strategically, calmly, deliberately, your entire being becomes magnetic. People can't explain why they respect you, but they do. That's psychological resonance, the invisible authority born from internal coherence. Comment this phrase below if it resonates with you. My thoughts are my kingdom. Because that's exactly what Machiavelli believed. That every human mind is a micro-kingdom, and your thoughts are your rulers. Let's go deeper. To hack your brain in the Machiavellian way, you must dismantle the illusions of modern intellect. The first illusion is that knowing is enough. In truth, knowledge without structure is chaos. Intelligence grows not from information, but from organization. The ability to rank thoughts, to prioritize truths, to separate signal from noise. The mind becomes 10 times sharper when it stops collecting and starts connecting. That's why Machiavelli spent his exile studying patterns of failure and success. He discovered that human behavior repeats itself endlessly, because emotion doesn't evolve as fast as technology. The same manipulations used in ancient courts now appear on social media. Only the stage has changed. The psychology remains the same. The second illusion is that logic makes you free. Logic is powerful, but alone it's sterile. The Machiavellian brain uses emotion as data, not as an enemy. Emotion reveals what logic hides, the pulse of humanity. To ignore it is blindness. To worship it is slavery. The wise walk between both. Logic as compass, emotion as radar. That balance is the secret rhythm of genius. When your logic and emotion cooperate instead of competing, your intelligence expands geometrically. You sense patterns others only calculate. You feel truth before you can articulate it. That's when you become impossible to control, because you operate on a frequency the manipulator cannot reach. The third illusion is that intelligence must be visible. Modern culture celebrates loud intellect, debates, opinions, performances of brilliance. But Machiavelli admired quiet intelligence, the wisdom that hides, watches, and strikes only when timing is perfect. He knew that a thought revealed too soon loses its power. Every time you explain your strategy, you weaken it. So learn to keep your mind as a fortress, open to new ideas, but guarded against exposure. People fear what they cannot read. Use that fear wisely. The fourth illusion, that peace of mind is the absence of conflict. Machiavelli saw the opposite. Peace is control amid conflict. Inner calm is not passivity. It's precision. It's the ability to choose your battles. The mind that tries to fight everything collapses. The Machiavellian mind picks its wars carefully, internal and external. It knows when to retreat, when to strike, and when to wait. This discipline is what makes you appear mysterious to others. You're no longer driven by impulse, but by timing. You become unpredictable, and therefore untouchable. The fifth illusion, that morality and strategy are opposites. People fear Machiavelli because they confuse his clarity with cruelty. But his philosophy was not evil, it was realistic. He saw morality as a tool, not a prison. A tool you use consciously to create stability, not one used against you to create guilt. Moral guilt is one of the strongest forms of control. It keeps intelligent people submissive. But when you understand that ethics should serve wisdom, not fear, you recover balance. You stop being manipulated by shame. You start acting from awareness, not conditioning. That's the difference between a servant and a strategist. Now, let's explore how this brain hack operates on the subconscious level. The place where real transformation happens. The subconscious is the silent architect of your perception. Every emotion, memory, and repetition forms its blueprint. Machiavelli didn't have neuroscience, but he observed its effects. He noticed that people's behavior could be predicted by their emotional patterns. If you trigger their insecurity, they'll betray themselves without knowing it. This is why manipulators don't need power. They only need your unresolved emotions. To become unmanipulable, you must expose your own patterns before others do. Start observing your recurring thoughts. Notice which situations make you feel powerless, angry, or desperate. Each of these emotions points to a belief someone else installed in you. When you dissolve that belief, you reclaim territory inside your mind. This is psychological sovereignty, the essence of Machiavellian intelligence. But the deeper revelation is this. The mind doesn't expand by force, it expands by awareness. You can't hack your brain through willpower alone. You must study it like Machiavelli studied rulers, with patience, curiosity, and detachment. Watch how your mind reacts under pressure. Watch how it rationalizes fear. The more you observe it, the more it obeys. Observation itself is domination. That's why meditation, silence, and solitude were practices shared by saints and strategists alike. They all understood that self-awareness is the ultimate weapon. The next paradox may disturb you. To see truth, you must kill your idealism. Idealism is comforting. It tells you the world should make sense, that people should be kind, that justice should prevail. But reality doesn't obey ideals. It obeys laws, psychological, biological, evolutionary. Machiavelli's brilliance was his refusal to lie to himself about human nature. He didn't expect virtue from corruption. He studied it as it was, not as he wished it to be. When you let go of how life should be, you begin to see it as it is. And that vision, though uncomfortable, is liberating. You no longer waste energy fighting reality. You start mastering it. After the fifth paradox, pause for a question. Do you prefer comforting lies or liberating truths? Comment your answer below, because this single choice defines the entire quality of your mind. The sixth paradox, the more you understand others, the less they can understand you. Once your perception expands, you begin to notice how predictable human behavior is. People become transparent to you, their motives, insecurities, manipulations, but in turn, you become opaque to them. They can no longer categorize you. This creates distance, even loneliness. But Machiavelli accepted this solitude as the tax of wisdom. To see deeply is to stand alone. It's the curse and privilege of intelligence. The seventh paradox. Fear sharpens intelligence, but only when mastered. Fear itself isn't the enemy, unconscious fear is. Machiavelli believed that fear, when analyzed, becomes insight. It reveals what you value, what you're attached to, and what you must detach from. The courageous are not fearless. They are conscious of fear. Every time you study what you fear, its power diminishes. That's how the mind evolves, by turning threats into teachers. The eighth paradox. Thinking strategically is an act of love. Strange, isn't it? But think about it. Strategy prevents suffering. A strategist doesn't overreact, doesn't destroy out of impulse, doesn't hurt others from confusion. To think clearly is to protect yourself and those you influence. Machiavelli's realism wasn't cynicism. It was compassion disguised as clarity. Because the clearer you think, the less harm you cause. The ninth paradox. Manipulators are not evil. They're asleep. They operate from survival instincts. Fear, hunger, validation. Understanding this disarms hatred. You stop reacting emotionally and start seeing them as case studies in unawareness. This is the final stage of intelligence. Compassion without weakness. You no longer take betrayal personally. You see it as a symptom of unconsciousness. And the 10th paradox, the highest form of control is to need none. When your mind stops clinging to control, it transcends manipulation. You realize that people's opinions can't harm your peace, that chaos doesn't require your participation, that truth doesn't need defense. This is enlightenment through strategy, the meeting point of Machiavelli and the mystics. A state where awareness becomes armor and thought becomes liberation. Let's be honest, awareness without action is paralysis. To know how the mind works but never train it is like owning a weapon you never learned to use. Machiavelli's genius was not only in what he understood, but in how he practiced it. His clarity came from repetition, daily observation, daily analysis, daily correction. He treated the mind as a machine that could be tuned with precision. And so can you, because intelligence isn't a gift, it's a ritual. Let's begin with the first exercise, the ritual of mental separation. Every morning, before touching your phone or speaking to anyone, give yourself 5 minutes of solitude. Sit still. Breathe. Then ask yourself one question. What am I feeling that is not mine? You'll be surprised how much of your mental noise belongs to others. Opinions you absorbed, anxieties you copied, expectations that aren't yours. This ritual creates a boundary between your mind and the world's programming. It teaches your brain to differentiate internal truth from external noise. Do it for 21 days and you'll notice your perception sharpen. The chaos of the world will still exist, but it won't enter you so easily. You'll begin to think from within, not from reaction. The second practice is the art of deliberate focus. The average mind jumps between thoughts like a restless animal, losing power with every distraction. Machiavelli believed focus was the most underrated form of strength. To focus is to dominate your mind's direction. Pick one subject each day, a problem, a goal, a human behavior, and analyze it deeply for 15 minutes. Dissect it like a philosopher, but feel it like a human. When you train your brain to hold attention without interruption, you sharpen its edge. Intelligence expands not by information, but by sustained focus. The third practice, record your emotions like a scientist. At the end of each day, write down 3 emotional reactions you experienced: anger, anxiety, irritation, pride. For each one, ask yourself, what triggered this? What belief was threatened? What did this emotion want me to do? This is not therapy, it's training. You are mapping your emotional algorithms. Over time, you'll start seeing the patterns. You'll realize that certain situations repeat because they're testing the same weakness. Once you see that, manipulation loses its grip. Because how can someone control a reaction you've already studied? The fourth practice, embrace voluntary discomfort. Machiavelli warned against comfort because comfort dulls perception. Every few days, do something that challenges your emotional or physical habits. Speak less in conversations. Wake up earlier. Fast for a few hours. Face a fear you usually avoid. The goal isn't suffering, it's sharpening. When the mind learns to stay calm under voluntary discomfort, it becomes immune to involuntary discomfort. This is how you train mental sovereignty. The brain adapts to chaos by expanding its tolerance. The fifth practice, limit your words, increase your observation. For 1 week, speak 30% less than usual. Say only what is necessary, meaningful, or strategic. Watch how silence changes your perception. When you stop rushing to respond, you start hearing. You notice tone, hesitation, contradiction. People reveal their psychology in the spaces between their words. Silence, when used consciously, turns you into an observer of human nature rather than a participant in noise. This practice reprograms your nervous system to value stillness. the same stillness Machiavelli used to read entire rooms without speaking a word. Pause for a moment and comment this phrase below. Silence is my strength, because that's the essence of this transformation. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you upgrade your intelligence. Now we go deeper. The sixth practice is mental fasting. Just as the body needs detox from food, the mind needs detox from stimulation. Choose one day each week to consume no media, no social networks, no noise. Let your brain breathe. You'll feel boredom at first, but boredom is the gateway to true creativity. It's in silence that your subconscious organizes information and forms insights. Machiavelli, exiled and isolated, wrote his greatest works not in comfort, but in silence. He turned solitude into strategy. When you stop feeding your mind constant input, your brain starts producing its own ideas. That's when creativity awakens. The seventh practice. Turn your fear into information. Every time you feel fear, write it down. Don't judge it, study it. Ask, what does this fear want to protect? What story does it tell me? You'll find that fear always contains data. It reveals what you value, what you believe you can lose, and what you haven't mastered yet. The untrained mind runs from fear. The trained mind dissects it. By analyzing fear instead of avoiding it, you drain its energy and harvest its wisdom. Eventually, fear becomes fuel, a signal that shows you where your next level begins. The eighth practice. Guard your mental diet. Your brain is an ecosystem. What you feed it determines its evolution. Surround yourself with information that strengthens perception, not anxiety. Limit gossip, outrage, and triviality. Read philosophy, psychology, and biographies of thinkers who challenged the world. Machiavelli read the classics daily, not for pleasure, but for calibration. He aligned his mind with timeless principles rather than temporary noise. You can do the same by curating your content intake. Each word you consume either builds your clarity or blurs it. Choose wisely. The ninth practice. Redefine your relationship with power. Power has been demonized for centuries because people confuse it with corruption. But power, in its pure form, is simply clarity in motion. It's the ability to act deliberately, to choose your influence instead of being chosen by others. Ask yourself, where in my life am I giving away power unconsciously? Maybe it's through guilt, dependency, or the fear of disapproval. Withdraw your energy from those points. Reclaim it by acting with intention. When you realize that power and peace can coexist, manipulation loses its appeal. You no longer crave control, because you are control. The 10th practice. Schedule strategic solitude. Once a week, isolate yourself for reflection. Walk without your phone. Sit with your own thoughts for an hour. It will feel uncomfortable, because silence confronts you with yourself. But that confrontation is purification. In solitude, illusions die. You start hearing your authentic voice, the one buried under noise and approval-seeking. This is the practice Machiavelli used daily. He would lock himself in his study, dress as if meeting ancient kings, and converse mentally with the great minds of history. In those silent dialogues, he sharpened his perception. You can do the same. Meet yourself in silence. That's where the real intelligence lives. Now, let's enter the second layer of application, the inner transformation. These next steps are not actions, but attitudes. They are ways of existing that sustain your mental power long term. Attitude 1. Detachment from outcome. You can't think clearly when you're obsessed with results. Detachment doesn't mean apathy. It means strategic patience. Do what must be done, then release the need for control. This frees your cognitive energy to focus on quality rather than fear. Machiavelli said, "Fortune favors those who act with calm precision." When you stop chasing control, control returns to you. Attitude 2. Cold empathy. Understand others deeply, but without emotional entanglement. This allows you to anticipate behavior without losing compassion. Cold empathy lets you navigate people's emotions like a surgeon. Precise, not cruel. It's how you become both kind and unbreakable. Attitude 3. The observer's posture. Wherever you are, in a meeting, a conversation, a conflict, practice observing yourself in real time. Notice your tone, your breath, your inner commentary. This meta-awareness is the bridge between reaction and mastery. Over time, your consciousness splits. One part acts, the other observes. That dual awareness is the essence of Machiavellian intelligence, the ability to think while acting. Attitude 4. Serenity under tension. The calm mind wins because it perceives more variables. Tension narrows awareness. Serenity expands it. Train your nervous system through breathing. When pressure rises, slow your breath, lower your voice, and focus your gaze. These signals tell your brain that you are safe, and safety expands intelligence. Power is not domination. It's regulation. The one who regulates emotion regulates outcome. Attitude 5. Self-respect as the foundation of perception. You can't perceive clearly if you constantly doubt your worth. Self-respect stabilizes the lens of your mind. It stops you from overanalyzing rejection, from interpreting indifference as insult. When you respect your own energy, you stop over-investing it in others. That alone multiplies your intelligence, because mental space returns. Now let's add the third layer, integration into daily life. How do you live Machiavellian awareness in a chaotic, noisy world? Through micro-habits of consciousness. For example, when someone provokes you, don't defend, diagnose. When someone flatters you, don't absorb, analyze. When you fail, don't collapse, record and recalibrate. When you win, don't celebrate too loudly, observe the reaction it causes. Each of these moments becomes a training ground for perception. Another technique is mental mirroring. When you talk to someone, imagine mirroring their emotion internally but keeping your face neutral. This trains your brain to feel empathy while maintaining control. It makes you unreadable yet deeply attuned. People will sense your depth, but not your direction. And that mystery commands respect. Finally, the practice of strategic solitude evolves into something greater. Philosophical alchemy. Each night before sleep, reflect on one question. What did I learn about human nature today? Write a single sentence. Over months, these reflections become your personal book of power, a living text of patterns, insights, and truths you've observed. This book becomes your private Machiavellian manual, your own scripture of self-awareness. Remember, all these practices lead to one final transformation. You stop reacting to life and start designing it. You begin to see every emotion as energy, every interaction as data, every obstacle as instruction. You no longer live on autopilot. You live with precision. And that precision is what makes you appear impossibly intelligent, effortlessly calm, and silently powerful. This is not magic. It's mental discipline. It's the same process that built Machiavelli's mind, a mind that saw through illusion while others drowned in it. And if you practice these rituals daily, your brain will start reorganizing itself around awareness. Within weeks, you'll notice you no longer take offense easily. You no longer rush to respond, and you no longer seek validation. You'll think slower but deeper. You'll become quieter but more dangerous. And when that transformation begins, remember this: intelligence isn't what you gain, it's what you remove. The noise, the fear, the dependence, the illusion. What remains after the removal is power. At this point, something within you has already begun to shift. You've seen how the mind can be trained, how perception can be redesigned, and how silence itself can become a form of power. But before we end, you must understand the ultimate truth behind all of this. The real secret Machiavelli hid beneath his lessons on politics, control, and power. It's this: the greatest intelligence is not in mastering others, but in mastering perception itself. The human mind does not see the world as it is. It sees the world as it has been programmed to see it. And whoever controls that programming controls reality. Machiavelli's brain hack wasn't about trickery or domination. It was about freedom. Freedom from mental conditioning. Freedom from emotional slavery. Freedom from the subtle tyranny of other people's opinions. He lived in a time when words could cost you your life, yet he chose to write the truth, cold, dangerous, unfiltered. Why? Because he understood that truth liberates those who dare to face it and enslaves those who fear it. The difference between the wise and the manipulated has always been courage, the courage to see clearly. The average person lives in reaction. They see insults and defend. They see praise and inflate. They see fear and freeze. But the Machiavellian mind lives in response. It acts from awareness, not from instinct. It pauses before emotion dictates its course. That pause, that sacred second between trigger and decision, is where power is born. Every time you choose awareness over reaction, your intelligence compounds. You become harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, harder to predict. You become, as Machiavelli would say, an actor in a world of spectators. Yet, here lies the paradox. The more you awaken, the lonelier it feels. When you see through illusion, you can no longer participate in it. You start noticing how people willingly surrender their freedom to systems, to screens, to approval. You realize that control doesn't come from tyrants. It comes from distraction. A distracted mind is a conquered mind. That's why the modern world invests so much in keeping you busy, entertained, and emotional. Because emotional people are predictable, and predictable people are profitable. But once you reclaim your attention, you become untouchable. You can no longer be sold fear or false hope. You stop chasing trends, validation, and endless noise. You begin to live from a place of calm sovereignty. The same calm Machiavelli described in his letters when he wrote about how he would retreat to his study, change into royal robes, and enter conversation with the great minds of the past. Alone in silence, he became more powerful than the kings who banished him. That is the secret. When you master your inner world, exile becomes a palace. So the final brain hack is not mental, it's existential. It's the realization that intelligence, power, and peace are not separate. They are one and the same state of consciousness, the stillness behind all thought. When your mind stops reacting, when it stops being baited by the external, it becomes radiant. You start feeling a sense of expansion, as if you can see the mechanics of life unfolding in front of you. The fears, desires, lies, and motives that govern humanity. You become the silent witness in a world addicted to noise. And from that position, you no longer need to dominate anyone because you already rule yourself. To live like this requires discipline, but it also requires compassion. Don't turn awareness into arrogance. Don't use clarity to judge others. Remember that most people are trapped in illusions they didn't choose. They inherited their beliefs, their fears, their emotional reflexes. You can't free them by arguing. You free them by embodying peace. That's the silent influence of true intelligence. You teach without teaching. You lead without forcing. You become an example of what mastery looks like. In the end, Machiavelli's greatest gift to humanity wasn't the prince. It was the revelation that power, when purified of ego, becomes wisdom. Power without clarity corrupts, but power with consciousness enlightens. That's why the modern world fears self-aware individuals, because they can't be controlled. You can't bribe someone who sees through the illusion of reward. You can't intimidate someone who understands the nature of fear. You can't seduce someone who has seen the emptiness of flattery. Such a person becomes an anomaly, calm when others panic, confident when others doubt, silent when others scream. That's the mark of a liberated mind. And so as you listen to these final words, ask yourself, who rules your mind? Is it fear? Is it the need for approval? Is it the echo of someone else's expectations? Or is it you, the observer behind it all? That's where true intelligence begins. Not in knowledge, but in ownership. The ownership of thought, the ownership of emotion, the ownership of attention. That ownership is the throne Machiavelli spent his life describing. The inner throne that no tyrant, no system, no manipulation can ever touch. Take one last breath and repeat silently, "My mind belongs to me." Let it sink in. Feel what that means, because from this moment forward, you are no longer a participant in manipulation. You are an architect of perception. You don't just think, you choose what to think. You don't just feel, you observe what you feel. And through that awareness, your intelligence becomes self-regenerating. It keeps growing, refining, expanding. You've now seen the entire path, from confusion to clarity, from reaction to mastery, from obedience to awareness. The Machiavellian mind is not dark, it's awake. It is the light that sees through shadows, the stillness that governs storms, the quiet authority that walks through chaos untouched. Once you awaken it, life will never be the same. You will see how every word, every gesture, every human interaction carries layers of meaning. You'll stop being deceived by appearances. You'll start reading energy, not expression, truth, not performance. And that's when your presence itself becomes power. If this journey has spoken to you, leave a comment below saying, "I see now." Not to please the algorithm, but to mark the moment you reclaimed your mind. Subscribe, stay connected, and watch until the end of every future video. Because this channel exists to awaken thinkers like you, to arm your mind with the wisdom they never taught in schools, and to protect your freedom in a world built on control. Remember Machiavelli's hidden law. He who governs himself governs the world. So govern yourself wisely, think deliberately, observe deeply, and walk in silence. For silence is the language of the powerful.